This content is AI generated for informational purposes only and should not be directly used for clinical decision-making.
Hello, and welcome back to the Neurosurgery Hub podcast. I'm Dr. Eris, a senior attending in neurosurgery.
And I'm Dr. Alara, a research fellow. Today, we're looking at a fascinating new study from the journal Epilepsia titled Dynamic Patterns of Verbal Memory Function After an Initial Decline Following Temporal Lobe Resection Against Epilepsy, Sex-Specific Differences in the Postoperative Course.
This is a timely topic, Ilara. For years, when we counsel patients for temporal lobe resection, or TLR, we focused heavily on the seizure freedom rates, which are excellent, but we always have that difficult conversation about the cognitive price, specifically the risk of verbal memory decline when we're operating on the language-dominant hemisphere.
Exactly. And the standard teaching has often been that what you see at 6 months or a year post-op is essentially the new normal. But this study, led by Pia Langenberg and her team, suggests that the postoperative course is much more dynamic than we previously thought, especially looking out to the 24-month mark.
Right. They looked at 169 people with temporal lobe epilepsy, PWTLE, and tracked them at 3 distinct time points: T1, which is preoperative, T2 at 6 months postoperative, and T3 at 24 months.
That 24-month window is key. Most studies stop at the initial postoperative phase, that 6 to 12-month mark. By extending it to 2 years, they were able to use repeated measures analysis of variance, or RM-ANOVA, to see how memory actually evolves.
Let's dive into the group-level results first. It's what we'd expect, but still foundational. What did they see regarding the resected hemisphere?
The RM-ANOVA showed a significant interaction effect between the time point and the resected hemisphere, with a p-value of less than 0.001. As we might predict, the language-dominant resected group showed a significant decline in verbal memory between T1 and T2. That's the immediate drop. And that decline remains significant when comparing T1 to T3.
So at a group level, the memory takes a hit early and stays down. That's the classic narrative. If you take out part of the dominant hippocampus or the parahippocampal gyrus, you lose some declarative memory processing capacity. But the real meat of this paper is when they looked at the individual level and the late postoperative changes, isn't it?
It is. When they moved beyond group averages to look at individual trajectories, they found what they called dynamic patterns of improvement, stability, and decline. Even if the group average looks flat between 6 and 24 months, the individuals within that group are often in flux.
This is a crucial distinction for residents and fellows to understand. A stable group mean can hide a lot of individual movement. Some patients are getting better, some are getting worse, and they're canceling each other out in the statistics. But the study specifically focused on those who had an initial decline at 6 months. They wanted to know, if you lose memory early, is it gone forever?
And that's where the most striking finding of the paper comes in, the role of sex. In the language-dominant resected group who experienced that initial decline, the researchers found a significant interaction between time point and sex.
This is the p equals 0.04 finding, right?
Exactly. At the 24-month mark, or T3, females exhibited significantly better recovery of verbal memory function compared to males.
That's a powerful piece of information for our preoperative counseling. We've known for a long time that there are sex-specific differences in how the brain organizes language and memory, but seeing it manifest as a late recovery advantage for women after TLR is quite significant.
It suggests a sex-dependent difference in cognitive recovery, or perhaps functional reorganization. The paper notes that while both sexes might see that initial drop because of the surgical trauma or the loss of the mesial structures, women seem to have a higher propensity for late improvement between 6 and 24 months.
Now, for the residents listening, let's be precise with the terminology used in the paper. We aren't just talking about feeling better. We're talking about verbal memory performance on standardized neuropsychological tests. The study highlights that the medial temporal lobe is critical for declarative memory processing. When we perform a resection, we're disrupting those circuits.
And the paper also mentions that these memory impairments contribute to a diminished quality of life. That's why this matters. It's not just a test score, it's daily functioning and well-being.
Let's look at the late course data again. If we have a male patient who shows a significant drop in verbal memory at his 6-month follow-up, based on this data, we might have to be a bit more cautious about his long-term recovery prospects compared to a female patient in the same position.
Precisely. The author suggests that these findings provide preliminary evidence for sex-dependent differences in cognitive recovery. It underscores the need for personalized counseling in pre-surgical decision-making.
It also changes how we talk to patients after surgery. If a woman comes into the clinic at 6 months post-op and is frustrated because she's struggling to remember names or word lists, we can now point to this evidence and say, the data shows that for many women, there is a secondary phase of recovery that happens between now and the 2-year mark.
It gives them hope, but it's hope grounded in data. Conversely, for our male patients, it might highlight the need for earlier or more intensive cognitive rehabilitation if their late recovery isn't as robust.
I also want to touch on the seizure freedom aspect. The paper references Helmstadter's earlier work, noting that seizure freedom is a major factor in maintaining stable verbal memory over the long term, sometimes as long as 20 years. Did this current study comment on the interaction between seizure control and these sex differences?
The study primarily focused on the resection and the sex-specific trajectories. However, they do reiterate that while TLR is efficacious for seizure reduction, the cognitive price is real. The focus here was really on that T2 to T3 window, the late postoperative course, and how sex acts as a modifier for those who already took a hit at T2.
It's a good reminder that neurosurgery isn't just about the technical success of the resection or the ECG patterns. It's about the long-term neurocognitive health of the patient. This paper really pushes us toward a more nuanced understanding of postoperative life.
And it challenges the older studies. You mentioned earlier, Dr. Aris, that some older literature, like the study by Rausch et al., suggested that an initial decline could even be followed by a further late decline after 9 years. But this 2026 study provides a more optimistic view for a subset of patients, specifically women, showing that recovery is possible.
It's about the dynamic patterns. I love that phrasing from the title. It's not a static loss, it's a shifting landscape.
To summarize for our listeners, at the group level, dominant hemisphere TLR leads to verbal memory decline that appears stable between 6 and 24 months. But at the individual level, there is significant movement, and the most important factor in who moves up toward recovery in that late phase appears to be sex.
So what are the clinical takeaways? First, don't stop assessing your patients at 6 months. If they are struggling, a 24-month neuropsychological evaluation might show a very different picture. Second, incorporate sex into your risk-benefit discussions.
And third, use this to tailor postoperative expectations. The initial verbal memory decline doesn't have to be the final word on a patient's cognitive status.
Well said, Ilara. This study from Epilepsia is definitely going on the required reading list for our residents. It's a great example of how longitudinal data can refine our surgical counseling and help us provide truly personalized care.
Absolutely. It's a step toward more refined care for people with temporal lobe epilepsy.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on the Neurosurgery Hub podcast. I'm Dr. Aris.
And I'm Dr. Ilara. We'll see you in the next episode.